WoW2 has been mentioned, and it's like the fad right now. Every YouTube video has the title, WoW2 is coming. Wow, I think I've got like 3 videos alone with WoW2 in the title now. But the truth is, WoW2 probably is not going to actually happen. It'll be a soft reset to the game at some point, whether it's in Midnight or post-World Soul Saga, when we get kind of like a relaunch of the game in a sort of way. The truth is, WoW2 real hard launch is not a real thing right now, but it almost was. Let's look back at the past, the time when Blizzard actually almost did a WoW 2/alternative versions of this game.
Blizzard has cancelled numerous games throughout its history, literally dozens of projects dedicated to the Warcraft universe. Some were axed during conceptual stages, while others were very close to release, yet never saw the light of day. At one point, developers even considered creating World of Warcraft 2.0, which seems particularly surprising in hindsight. So, today, I want to discuss all the cancelled projects set within the Warcraft universe. First off, let's establish...
Oh, I see. He has one more. WoW 2 back in Mists of Pandaria when the talent system improved the talent systems. I actually think like the closest thing we've gotten to WoW 2 in the game kind of was Cataclysm, where they kind of redid a bunch of the world, up-resed a bunch of the world. We saw up-reses of the characters themselves. The new character model started to hit the game too, with the Goblin character model, which was an upgrade compared to previous ones and everything. So that's kind of happened. But we've never actually gotten like an official WoW 2, but it looks like it's been talked about before, as well as other alternative versions to the game that are going to be mentioned here in this video.
That cancelling projects isn't inherently bad, and I don't think Blizzard should be criticized for it. Any major company constantly experiments, develops concepts, and invests in expanding its popular universes. What looks good on paper doesn't always translate well in practice. So, let's begin our journey through the cancelled Warcraft projects with Warcraft Legends. One could say this game became an early prototype for the well-known Warcraft 3. At the time, Blizzard's popularity was surging, and the second Warcraft game had been a success. The developers tried to venture into something new. In Warcraft Legends, instead of building bases, managing economies, and training workers like in traditional real-time strategy games, the player would focus entirely on a hero and a small army. The camera was intended to be fixed behind the hero in a third-person perspective, base building would be absent, and characters would command small combat squads.
Interesting. So, I mean, I guess Warcraft Legends was kind of like the precursor to WoW then. Because they took their RTS, if you don't know, like original World of Warcraft, the way it was created was in fact created from the RTS engine, and they just brought the camera down to a third-person view, and you played it that way. So that's kind of what this was. Warcraft Legends sounds like it was like the heroes, you could be Jaina Proudmoore or whatever, but they brought the game from an RTS top-down look to a third-person look, and you played as a single character.
Limited information
with abilities
available.
And stuff. Look at
My
this.
best guess is the overall concept would have resembled the Rexxar campaign from Warcraft 3. In that campaign, you also don't build structures or mine gold. Instead,
we're watching the video.
You control a few heroes and a handful of additional units, completing various quests and objectives. Ultimately, the game was cancelled, and disagreements emerged within the development team. We don't have this information directly from Blizzard, unfortunately, but from other sources, including later journalistic investigations. This means the data might be skewed, or even somewhat biased. Based on these reports, Blizzard was hesitant to take risks, and leaned towards developing Warcraft 3 instead of Warcraft Legends. One of the key ideological drivers behind Warcraft Legends was Mike O'Brien, a prominent figure who had worked on many important company projects. Reportedly, several employees, including figures like Chris Metzen, asked a company co-founder to remove Mike O'Brien from the project.
Damn.
O'Brien allegedly perceived this as a profound betrayal. Not long after, he and several other employees made the decision to leave Blizzard. Together, they went on to found their own gaming company, ArenaNet, which would later become renowned for its popular MMO, Guild Wars. While O'Brien's removal from the Warcraft Legends project was a significant catalyst, the reasons for these talented individuals...
So not only did this guy get, like, ousted, he went on to create Guild Wars, which has actually created a lot of things for their MMO that Blizzard has stolen since he left. For one, Dragonflight, what's it called? Dynamic dragon riding and all that shit. Dynamic Flight. That came from Guild Wars, like directly stolen from it, basically. If you've ever played Guild Wars, you already knew this, but yeah, all that dynamic flight with the twisting and the turning and all that shit, that was directly pulled from Guild Wars. I think there's a couple other things they've taken from that game. But interesting, I didn't know that Guild Wars was started by the original company that was founded by previous Blizzard employees.
Departure were likely deeper, with each having accumulated various grievances over time. However, that's a story for another discussion. In any case, the Warcraft Legends project was ultimately cancelled, its core ideas beginning to evolve into what would become Warcraft 3. The design philosophy shifted significantly away from a purely hero-centric approach, transforming into a more traditional real-time strategy game where the hero remained important, but wasn't always the sole decisive factor. For instance, among the interesting concepts explored was a hero's leadership stat. A higher characteristic would allow a squad to contain more units. You've likely heard of Warcraft Adventures, Lord of the Clans, if you follow Blizzard, and Warcraft
I've seen this one before.
I often mention this game in my own videos, especially in the context of Thrall, so we won't dwell on it too long. Its genre...
This is literally how like all the games looked when I was in elementary school. It was this like cartoon art style. I don't know if you guys remember Zoombinis? I played that shit so much in elementary school. It was the same thing. It was that very cartoonish art style that a lot of games used to use back then, and they had artists freaking drawing this shit, fully rendering it and everything. So they were going to do a Thrall-based campaign in this art style where he basically went through the story of Thrall, Green Jesus, that's right, and learned a bunch of stuff about him.
Like Warcraft Legends, was unusual for Blizzard, reflecting a desire by some developers to try something new. The game was intended to tell the story of Thrall, the future war chief of the Horde, and a profoundly important character for the entire universe. Players would have learned about the plight of the Orcs after the Second War, when many were imprisoned in internment camps. We would have experienced Thrall's escape from the captivity of Blackmoor, his overseer, and even met Alexstrasza, whom the Orcs had once enslaved to use her children as weapons against the Alliance.
Yeah, he kind of glazed over that lore. Yeah, they didn't use her children. They force-fucked her. That's right. You don't know the lore. I think Blizzard retroactively changed this because now society can't handle a story like that. But yeah, they raped Alexstrasza. They like forced dragons to fuck Alexstrasza so she could give birth to dragons so they could use those dragons in battle. Yep, that's the true story. That's the old WoW lore.
The story would have culminated in Blackmoor's demise. Unfortunately,
yeah, you didn't know that, guys? You didn't
ultimately decided the game was important.
Yeah, the previous lore of Alexstrasza was that she was raped constantly to produce dragons. Yeah, it's dark. No, yeah, it is. I don't know if they, I think they tried to retroactively change that a little bit in Dragonflight, but the original lore was that she was raped constantly.
Poor condition and shouldn't be released.
Rape and WoW? No, yeah.
Blizzard's reputation. However, in my opinion, nothing truly terrible would have happened. In Warcraft 3, we meet Thrall as a seemingly random character who has already managed to lead a portion of the Orcs. Warcraft Adventures would have provided crucial and, in my view, quite interesting backstory. Even now, looking back, the game reveals fascinating little details that fill in gaps in the lore. For instance, Durotan's axe, which was originally intended to be Thrall's weapon, was inexplicably replaced with another in Warcraft 3. We would have encountered a host of intriguing characters, such as Drekthar, a prominent figure of the Frostwolf clan, and Zul'jin, who influenced the trolls joining the Orcs during the Second War. We might even have learned more about the fate of the fallen kingdom of Alterac. This kingdom was devastated for its betrayal in the Second War, and it featured in the background of Warcraft Adventures. Even Blackmoor himself, the game's main antagonist, was originally from Alterac in this storyline, not Lordaeron.
Oh wow, wait a minute, look at this. Look at the lore characters on here. Who is this? Is this a Turellian? Is that Turellian? It says, I think this says Turellian, Cangas? I thought this said Khadgar. First, Illyria and Daneth. Oh man, these are the people who fought Canagas. I don't know who Canagas is. But I know Turellian and Illyria, 1,000 gold pieces rewards for these. Okay, these people who fought in the 1,000-Year War. Look at that. By the way, look at this version of Turellian. Fucking bald with a mohawk and a badass beard. Obviously, we went a different art direction with him. It's a badass looking version of Turellian.
From Alterac in this storyline, not Lordaeron, as in the modern lore. Overall, reviewing gameplay footages and contemporary discussions, I don't see much negative public reaction. On the contrary, many fans would likely have been thrilled if the game had been released in its time, but, alas, what's done is done. Warcraft strategy games were, without a doubt, legendary. Developers naturally considered a continuation. However, by the time these thoughts solidified, World of Warcraft already existed. This raised crucial questions. Was a new RTS truly worth the effort? Would the resulting product be as popular relative to the company's size? And if they did make it, what would it be about? Before World of Warcraft, developers could gradually unveil bits of lore and the game world to players. But now, the world was already explored from Darnassus to Booty Bay. Developers also began to suspect that the RTS genre itself wasn't as popular as it had been in the late 90s or early 2000s. Based on very indirect and fleeting mentions, it seems developers genuinely took some steps towards creating Warcraft 4 around 2007-2008. They even hinted that after the release of StarCraft 2, they might potentially focus on the next strategy installment. But, as we all know, no Warcraft 4 ever materialized. If it was indeed being developed internally, it likely didn't progress beyond basic foundational work. Perhaps it was quietly shelved as priorities shifted toward more profitable live service projects like World of Warcraft.
Yeah, well, I mean,
World of
Warcraft took off at such a high level, and the success was so far beyond what they could have ever expected that basically it became an all hands on deck. We got to get this shit right, and everybody needs to be working on making sure World of Warcraft's running smoothly. So yeah, basically a lot of projects got canceled at Blizzard if you look back at their past because of the success of World of Warcraft.
Of Warcraft 3, Reforged might spur developers to further pursue strategy games. However, Reforged was not well received. Periodically, headlines emerge suggesting that the Blizzard-Microsoft merger might enable the former to begin developing StarCraft 3 and Warcraft 4. But these are speculations, and realistically, it currently seems that if continuations for these two strategy games do appear, it certainly won't be anytime soon. And it's not even a given that they'll ever be released, unfortunately. Okay, if Warcraft 4 seemed like a very remote and forgotten concept, let's discuss an equally intriguing idea. World of Warcraft 2. Generally, sequels to existing MMO games aren't entirely unique. For instance, there's Guild Wars, which received a second installment, almost 7 years after its release. This partly happened because the developers wanted to introduce features and innovations they couldn't implement on the original game's engine. Then there's Lineage, where the first and second parts differ radically. We can also recall the ancient EverQuest, MapleStory, and a host of other projects. In 2014, a gaming publication managed to interview...
Yeah, I've seen this before. I don't think Blizzard would ever go this hyper-realistic route with World of Warcraft. I think part of what's kept it timeless is the art style. This Unreal Engine 5, Orgrimmar, and all this stuff, like, it's cool to look at, but I just don't think it'll ever happen.
Tom Chilton, who was World of Warcraft's game director at the time. The publication asked if the developers had ever considered creating World of Warcraft 2, to which Tom Chilton definitively replied,
Definitely.
Yes, absolutely. Moreover, he revealed they had been discussing it internally for over 10 years. However, at that point, the prospect seemed very distant, and a whole range of problems would need to be solved. For example, what would they do with the first game? Continue it or not? Should the two games coexist, or would they be entirely separate products? 10 years have passed since that conversation. Has any clarity emerged? Well, it's become clear that there is no World of Warcraft 2, and it's unlikely to appear in the next 5 years, though speculations about it periodically arise in the community, and fans sometimes create mock-ups of what Warcraft might look like with new graphics. Occasionally, developers also add fuel to the fire. For example, in late 2024, Ion Hazikostas, the game's current game director, stated that a theoretical hypothetical World of Warcraft 2 is possible. However, he emphasized that they are currently more than satisfied with the original Warcraft, and there is no immediate need for a sequel.
The way I see WoW2 happening is, and I've mentioned this before, going to the other side of Azeroth, where you would essentially have not just more islands for more expansions, but you would have two pieces of land masses that are the size of Kalimdor and the Eastern Kingdoms, two new continents to explore, starting again at ground zero on that side of the world, and then building up power from there through the next, 20 years or so, right? So that's how I see it working out, and obviously that side of the world would be built with the newer engines that currently exist in WoW, and, the up-res graphics and everything else, so it would look cool. It would look like the highest fidelity versions of WoW that we've seen so far, but it wouldn't be a hard reset on the game where you can't go back to the old shit or you lose all of your old shit. It would just be a return to the basics, two new continents to explore over multiple expansions. That's how I see a WoW 2 happening.
I also want to mention Peggle, World of Warcraft Edition. This wasn't a cancelled project, but rather a closed and forgotten one. For context, Peggle is a casual puzzle game. There even used to be an add-on that brought the game into
Why Peggle? Why the fuck would they call it pegging? Like, what?
Warcraft. It gained a bit of popularity for a while, especially among
Oh, Peggle. Was this a real game? I never played Peggle. What the hell is this?
players looking for a break between
Interesting
raids.
name choice.
Then, the developers of Peggle and Blizzard decided to collaborate, resulting in Peggle, World of Warcraft Edition. Essentially, it was the same casual game,
the same thing with a
simply
WoW
reskinned
wallpaper.
with Warcraft
Yeah.
themes. Instead of generic nature backdrops, you might see levels featuring Onyxia, Stormwind, or Ragnaros. In 2011, this curious crossover was discontinued and forgotten to history. In 2021, it became known that Blizzard was developing at least 2 mobile games. The first project appears to have been Warcraft Rumble, which was released relatively recently. However, the second project was likely cancelled. More clarity emerged the following year. This second project was reportedly similar to Pokemon Go, but instead of catching
Pet
Pokemon,
battles.
one would presumably collect Warcraft pets and interact with the Warcraft universe setting. What's currently happening with the project isn't entirely clear.
Man, I think a lot of people were probably disappointed this didn't happen. There's a lot of pet battle lovers out there who would have loved to play this. But they probably just didn't see like a market for it, because basically what you'd have is this would be very niche. Like just people that play WoW would be interested in playing this over Pokemon Go. And then of the people who play WoW, only the people interested in pet battles would do it. Now, I mean, I guess you could add like mount incentives or cool stuff that you could get in the real game if you play the WoW pet battle game, but besides that, it was probably too niche. They just thought the audience would be too small for it.
There were persistent rumors of its cancellation circulating among fans and industry insiders, while others suggested it was still quietly in development as of 2022. Regardless, the game has not been released, and it's uncertain if it ever will be, making it one of the many Blizzard experiments that may never see the light of day. We recently learned about 3 more cancelled Warcraft games, largely thanks to Jason Schreier. Unlike past projects where we had official mentions or even leaked builds, information on these 3 relies on anonymous sources, making the details quite vague. The first project, codenamed Neptune, was arguably one of the most ambitious undertakings. It was being developed in close cooperation with NetEase, Blizzard's Chinese game localization partner, with whom Blizzard had also successfully collaborated on Diablo Immortal. A dedicated team of over 100 employees was working on this title, and it was envisioned as a large-scale mobile MMO game. The events of this game were planned to unfold in the distant past of Warcraft lore.
So what, they were going to give us Raid Shadow Legends, but WoW on your phone?
Though precisely when remains unclear. Given the rich and detailed history of Azeroth, I'd venture a theory that it might have been set around the time of the First War, a pivotal era that shaped much of the world's destiny. Several reasons led to Neptune's cancellation. Firstly, Blizzard and NetEase reportedly disagreed on working conditions. This friction later escalated, causing Blizzard's games to temporarily disappear from the Chinese market in—
This was a Bobby Kotick and China fallout. Basically, Bobby Kotick had an ego stroke where he just completely got pissed off at NetEase, and they didn't come to an agreement. Anyway, since then, they agreed again. NetEase is the Chinese arm of Blizzard. Basically, you know, if you operate in China, there's a rule in China. It's a communist nation. So there is a rule in China that if you want to sell goods in China or sell your product in China, you have to team up with a Chinese company to do so. You cannot just export your goods over there and enter the Chinese market. So the Blizzard's version of that is NetEase. They team up with NetEase so WoW can be played in China. That's why when the deal fell apart, there was no more WoW in China until they re-signed the deal. So NetEase is that for WoW, and since then they've also worked on Diablo Immortal and other shit like that. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if they were working on some kind of WoW mobile game if it was with NetEase.
Entirely, a situation many will recall. The second reason was the project's quality. Apparently, developers couldn't polish Neptune to their desired standard. The second project, codenamed Avalon, was the strangest. Rumors of this unannounced game date back to 2013, when Blizzard began hiring for an undisclosed project. It was to be produced by Mike Booth, who previously worked at Valve, including on Left 4 Dead. 2 years later, quite abruptly, Booth left Blizzard, stating his project wasn't a good fit for the company, and so Avalon vanished. Little is known about it. From very brief descriptions, the game was said to resemble Dragon Quest Builders. This suggests a Minecraft-like experience, but with a more focused and structured storyline, a variety of quests, and the need to assist NPCs and defend towns from threats. Avalon would have similarly taken place within the rich world of Azeroth. Reportedly, the game was even quite fun and interesting during its development phase. Finally, the last project, Andromeda, remains almost entirely unknown to the public. It was purportedly similar to God of War in terms of gameplay and style, but with Thrall as the main protagonist.
Oh yeah, I've heard about this. Like a single-player, a Witcher-esque game mode of World of Warcraft. I think that would have been popular, actually, like a campaign like that. Or like a Dark Souls World of Warcraft where, like, yeah, you play as your single tune, gearing out against the environment. It's a PvE game. I think it probably would have been a good thing, but just developing it, probably they didn't have enough devs. Now they have Microsoft, so maybe they do have more dev power, but I don't know if we'll ever see a game like that.
Perhaps it was envisioned as
Blizzard.
A new interpretation or spiritual successor to the cancelled Warcraft Adventures, albeit set in a different time and place within the Warcraft universe. The game was cancelled due to its team leader, Alex Afrasiabi, who was fired in 2020 and whose problematic conduct became a central part of the 2021 Blizzard scandal. Blizzard attempted to find a new director, but failed, leading to the game's termination. In essence, Thrall unluckily missed out on 2 separate dedicated games about
So that it got canceled because Alex couldn't keep his pee-pee in his pants.
him.
Interesting.
Currently, these are all the known cancelled Warcraft projects. It's entirely possible there are more unannounced projects, including mobile ones, within our beloved universe that we simply don't know about yet. But as we've seen, the Warcraft franchise alone has had a number of interesting projects that, for better or worse, were
Interesting
abandoned.
video.
Some were genuinely problematic and would have harmed the company, while others, in my opinion, could have turned out to be quite good games. But we have what we have.
Yeah, interesting game. Like an abrupt end there to the video. Yeah, some interesting stuff there. I think probably the thing that didn't shock me that much is that WoW2 has in fact been talked about amongst the dev team and everything else. And yes, we know. I think Konisia, you mentioned in the chat during the video, they're planning out to like patch 17 at this point, like 17, right? So they're clearly looking at. I don't think you can go to patch 17 and just continue to do what you're doing from right now. But if you have some sort of soft-ish reset, like I said, go to the other side of the world, new continents, new stuff, because you can't just go to the 17th expansion, and have the 17th island show up and all of a sudden, off the coast of the Eastern Kingdom. Like, that's ridiculous. So going to the other side of the world, I think, allows you to basically prep yourself for another 20 years of World of Warcraft if it's done right. We'll see. But overall, the canceled WoW projects are fun to look at, and yes, WoW 2, a legitimate consideration from the past. Nice video.